Hello everyone and welcome to a brilliant attacking game from round 8 of the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour finals. It's Levon Aronian versus Magnus Carlsen, and Magnus already won the Champions Chess Tour. He doesn't need to finish the tournament, no one can catch up to him, but this tournament is still going on, and this is another game that we're going to show. Sorry about not finishing the match Magnus had against Timur Rajabov. Rajabov won that match very nicely, but we had some grape picking action with the family, so of course that could not be avoided or postponed, nor one should ever avoid that. So that being said, let's check out this game. So Levon with the white pieces opens with e4. This is the first game of their match. We have knight to c6 by Magnus going for the Nimzovich defense, and now d4. We have d5 now, sort of the Scandinavian variation of the Nimzovich, and it's pretty much the same thing. If captures, captures. Now black goes after the d4 pawn, white will defend it, and then black will probably execute e5, because why not? If it's allowed, you should do it. Knight, for example, c3, bishop b4, and the game continues. This is okay for both players. But here we have e5, advancing the pawn. And before I continue this, I would just like to address one thing. From time to time I get some questions in the comment section about why not introducing the evaluation bar into my videos. The problem is you think that this would give you a clearer idea of what's happening on the board, but that could not be further from the truth. The thing is, when you put any position to an engine, the engine will say, okay, white is better, 0.79, let's say, at the depth 17, and then you allow the engine to crunch the numbers a bit further, then you get depth 18, then depth 19, then depth 20, and with every depth the evaluation changes, and then we would have to wait a very long time during the video for you guys to see what the actual evaluation was. And sometimes if the position is complicated and there's really a lot to consider, I even allow the engine to crunch the numbers to maybe even depth 40, maybe even beyond, but it's only for certain positions, and it would take too much time during a video to allow the engine to do this. So I do it before the video, or if the tournament is happening, then I do it during the game, and then I just present it to you guys without you guys having to wait for the actual evaluation. And if it's a really big tournament like the Champions Chess Tour here, then for example, if Magnus is playing, then the Norwegian supercomputer CAISSA also is evaluating all the games. I don't know at what depth, but I think it's at least the depth 50 or beyond, which is unreachable to our engines, at least if you know, we don't want to spend like half an hour evaluating a position. So I also use CAISSA's assessment of the position while showing these games to you guys, and just something I wanted to address. It would consume simply too much time to have the evaluation bar on the video, and it would never be correct. Like we go through the moves during these presentations too fast, and the engine would never be able to give you a clear prediction of what's actually happening on the board. So I use all of this and then just, you know, package it nicely and then present it to you guys without you guys having to wait. That's basically why I'm not using an evaluation bar during my videos. So that being said, let's check out the game, or rather continue checking out the game. So e5, Levon goes for the advanced variation, and now bishop to f5. You want to play e6, you don't want your bishop closed inside of your pawn chain, you want to play e6, and then maybe this bishop comes to g6 at some point, or white will probably develop the bishop to d3, and then we can trade it here by either capturing, or we're going to allow white to capture our bishop, all depending on what is played. And you could go for some sort of a bayonet attack, as it seems like a similar position, but in this position it doesn't really work. It's been played a few times without much success. So c3, just strengthening the center here, and now e6. Magnus closes the chain, bishop to d3, and now of course knight g to e7. Now we want white to capture here, and then we get a beautiful outpost for our knight on f5. We have knight to e2 by Levon, and Magnus plays h5, and this is a very useful move. Like we said, this bishop has to capture on f5. At some point we're going to bring our knight to f5, and we don't want to allow white to be able to dislodge this knight by playing a move like g4. So bishop to g5, you played h5, you can no longer play h6, so bishop to g5 makes sense, and Magnus unpins, queen to d7. And now the position has been reached before. Bishop captures on f5 is a known move, but Levon plays h4, and it is now only as of move 8 that we have a completely new game. And I would just like to mention that Levon played h4 in many positions even before AlphaZero made it cool. So he is one of the pioneers of the h4 idea in general. We have bishop captures on d3, queen captures on d3, and now knight to f5. And now this knight is beautifully placed. You will have a lot of problems dislodging it from there. Knight to d2 by Levon, and now bishop to e7, offering a trade of bishops, and Levon trades. Captures. Of course, you capture with the knight. You want to make room for your c pawn, but it's still unclear whether Magnus will castle kingside or queenside. Levon's king still in the center of the board, so they're both still waiting to see what the other guy will do. Knight to f3, now with the e-pawn here guarding against f6, maybe the knight can even be put to g5 at some point. We have queenside castles by Magnus, and now comes a4. Levon wants to push those pawns, and well, not like that obviously, and start attacking Carlsen's queenside, and now knight to g6. Magnus will of course do the exact opposite, and he will attack Levon's kingside. We have g3, strengthening the pawn here, and now we have f6. We've put all of our pieces where they need to be, and now it's time to bust open the center and try and use the f file for some attacks here. So b4, Levon has seen too many of my videos not to know that b4 is always the correct idea. We have king to b8, a nice prophylactic move by Magnus, and now castles kingside. We have rook h to f8, now preparing to put some heavy pieces on the f file, and king to h2. By Levon, adding more defense to these pawns. At some point, Magnus could really start sacrificing those knights. So queen to f7, you want to capture here, and then the position will open up. And now knight e to g1. Seems like a passive square for the knight, but the knight and queen are doing a wonderful job guarding white's king side. We have knight to h6, Magnus now bringing the knight to g4, and rook a to e1, adding another defender to the pawn, because this pawn will be a weak pawn. So knight to g4 with check, king to g2, and now f captures on e5. We have d captures on e5. Luckily, our pawn is nicely protected here, even though both of the knights are attacking it. And now Magnus says, all right, we need to somehow increase the pressure, but it's very hard. We can't really do anything on the f file. It's very unlikely that this rook can come to f5 and then put even more pressure along the f file. So let's play queen to e8, put some pressure on the a4 pawn, but we're really going for rook to f5, adding another attacker to the e5 pawn. So how will Levon defend this? Levon, of course, not interested in defending the a4 pawn. He just plays knight to h3. Now with the queen leaving this f file, we can allow this knight to move, and now this knight is coming to g5, and that will put a lot of pressure on the e6 pawn. Magnus continues with his plan. He plays rook to f5. Now the e5 pawn is attacked 3 times, but now knight h to g5, and it's not really a pawn sacrifice, as you'll see. Magnus grabs the pawn. There's really nothing better. Knight 6 captures on e5. Knight captures. We have knight captures on e5, and now comes queen to d4. Now with a double attack on the knight here, but also if the knight moves, you can go after that g7 pawn, and also once the knight moves, you will have a very nice attack on the e6 pawn. So Magnus plays the absolute best idea, knight to c6. For the moment, the queen is attacked, so you can't go after this pawn, but you could go after queen to g7, but this is an attacking game. Kings have castled on opposite sides of the board, so Levon not too crazy about opening up the g file for Magnus's pieces to use just yet. He moves the queen back, queen to d3, and now, okay, you have to do something about this pawn being attacked, so Magnus just defends it. Rook to f6 defends the pawn, and now b5. Attacks the knight and asks Magnus, what do you do with this knight? You can't go here, the rook covers that. You can't go here, otherwise we just pick up the pawn. Well, other than that, there really are no good squares. So you have to go to a5. It's an ugly square, and for the moment, Magnus is definitely down a piece until this knight rejoins the game. And only now, queen to h7. Putting pressure on g7. Also h5 is threatened if this queen ever moves from e8. And now how do you defend this? Well, Magnus has a few things to consider, but if you guarded the pawn here, you could already run into a lot of trouble. For example, knight captures on e6, and after you capture, let's say rook captures, and queen h8, it's game over. there's really nothing for black to do. You have to give up the rook just to be able to block checkmate with the queen. And now, of course, the rook against knight endgame is completely winning. So instead, after queen to h7, Magnus continues in a very principled manner. He pushes e5. It's very dangerous pawn, so why not continue advancing it? And now, only now, Levon captures on g7, puts pressure on the rook. We have rook to f5, and now queen to h7, continues harassing Carlsen's rook, and now Magnus goes all the way back, rook to f8. If rook to f6, we probably see a draw here, but you never know. Would it be a threefold repetition or not? Magnus goes back, rook to f8, and now comes f4. This is what Levon wanted. Now you will continue advancing the pawn because the e-pawn is pinned, you cannot capture, and this way Levon creates a beautiful pass pawn. So e4, Magnus also creates a pass pawn, and f5 now. We have queen to e5, not worried about knight to e6, because for the moment it doesn't really do all that much. If knight e6, rook g8, and you could have some problems here. You'd probably have to go back, knight to g5, so it's just wasting a move. Levon advances the pawn all the way to f6, now takes away the e7 square from the black queen, because aside from knight to e6, you could also try knight to f7. Seems like it's winning, but queen to e7, and you don't have even that. Now the knight can't really move. So by playing f6, you take away the e7 square from Carlsen's queen, and now what can Magnus play? Well, if you go after the pawn with rook captures on f6, then you get knight f7, but now queen to e7 is impossible because we just captured the rook, and after queen captures, now we pick up the knight, queen captures, and just queen captures on h5. Of course, we're now completely winning, we're up the exchange, and even though black has some pawns here in the center, it's really not that relevant. So instead, after this f6 move, we have queen captures on c3 by Magnus. Now he has two connected pass pawns, and well, the white king is somewhat vulnerable. But Levon says, not a problem. I'm just going to push my pawn to f7. And now, how do you defend this? Magnus says, all right, I have to bring this knight into the game. We're not winning this game being down a piece. And now knight to e6, going after the rooks. And there really isn't all that much for Magnus to do now. He has to continue attacking. Queen to d2 check, king to h3, and now knight to e5, going for knight to f3. This does come with a sort of a rook sacrifice because the rook cannot be captured. It's really an exchange sacrifice, but Magnus doesn't even bother to capture this. He just plays knight to f3. He threatens checkmate on h2. We've reached the position from the thumbnail, hopefully. And now there is one move that wins the game for Levon. So feel free to pause the video here and win this game for Levon while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting this, well, almost unspottable move, because who would play such a thing? And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's not rook captures on f3. It's queen captures on h5. That's the good stuff. The problem with rook captures on f3, yes, there's no checkmate anymore, but after queen captures on e1, your rook is still hanging and checkmate is still being threatened. The king will not be able to go to g4, and now there really isn't all that much. If knight d7 check, hoping for captures and bringing another queen into the game, we just move the king. And now you're going to have to block with rook f2, but we just capture it. Queen captures, and after queen g8, it's a draw. There's nothing either player can do here. We would probably see a nice repetition here or something. So instead, Levon played queen captures on h5, but not right away. He first played knight to d7 check. He wants to check if Magnus, wants to blunder the game on the spot. Magnus decides against it. He just moves the king, king to a8, and now queen captures on e5. And this is just beautiful. It doesn't matter if queen h2 check is played, king g4, and there is no way to keep attacking the white king. The king is just extremely safe here, even though if it's on g4. So after queen captures on h5, knight captures on e1 was played, but now Levon just plays f8 queen, brings another queen into the game, and it was in this position on move 40 that Magnus Carlsen resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. You could still continue harassing the black king. For example, queen g2 check, king g4, queen e2 check. You're going to play king g5, queen e3 check, king to g6. You can even play queen captures on g3 check. But after king h7, there's nothing more that you can play here. And whatever you play, you're getting checkmated. So there's no hope for black here whatsoever. So yeah, really interesting. They could have played it up to here just, for the fun of it, for the white king being on h7, but I guess no one was interested. So yeah, after f8 queen on move 40, it was in this position that Magnus Carlsen resigned the game. So game 2 and 3 were again a draw, and then Levon won again in game 4 with the black pieces. So Magnus was not able to force anything with white, and Levon wins this match. So even though Magnus won the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour in general, he did run into some problems even in the last round against Temur Rajabov and now against Levon Aronian. But today is the match that everyone is looking forward to, and that of course is Magnus versus Wesley So. So we're gonna check out that one as well. So yeah. That's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Aaron Anders, Garrett Myers, Mark Adrian Fase, Micah Kennedy, and Konstantinos Rompedakis for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I have really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of this wonderful event, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.